They all said no man would ever stay, that she was too wild, too stubborn, too untamed for love, that any heart brave enough to reach for her would soon be broken and abandoned. Every whisper, every sideways glance in the dusty streets of Dry Creek reminded Clara Dawson that people rarely saw her for who she was. They only saw what they feared in her. Yet, as the golden sun dipped behind the rolling prairie hills, painting the horizon in fiery streaks of red and gold, a shadow fell across the path she had taken to the barn. She turned, expecting the usual, an animal, a neighbor, a trick of the light, but it was something different. A man, tall and solid, rode alone through the dust. He was calm, yet every inch of him spoke of danger and certainty. He dismounted, his boots crunching against the gravel, and without hesitation he stepped toward her. "I'll never let you go," he said, voice low, steady, and impossibly certain. Clara's breath caught, and in that instant, everything she had believed about herself and the world shifted. In this story, you will walk alongside Clara, a woman judged too fiercely by her neighbors, who has spent her life guarding her heart against disappointment, ridicule, and loneliness. You will meet Luke Harper, a mysterious cowboy whose strength and quiet intensity hide a life filled with secrets, past heartbreak, and a code of loyalty few can understand. You will witness the slow unraveling of suspicion, fear, and uncertainty, replaced with moments of raw connection, tenderness, and the stirring of love neither expected. Along the way, shocking revelations will surface, a hidden message, an enigmatic visitor, and the truth about a past that has quietly shaped the present. This story will pull you into the wide-open landscapes of Dry Creek, where golden fields stretch into the horizon, and the prairie wind carries whispers of secrets yet untold. You will feel the pull of curiosity, the sting of judgment, and the heart-thudding tension of love emerging against all odds. By the end, you will see that courage is more than daring deeds. It is trusting someone with your heart. You will understand that love can flourish even in places that seem unwelcoming, and that sometimes the bravest choice is to surrender to the impossible. Clara and Luke's journey is one of resilience, hope, and the transformative power of unshakable devotion. Clara Dawson had grown up on the edges of Dry Creek, in a modest farmhouse that overlooked the rolling prairie. From the first light of dawn to the last flicker of sunset, her life was a rhythm of labor and reflection. She tended her small garden, fed the chickens, mended clothes, and cared for Dusty, her faithful mare. Her days were long, filled with tasks that left her hands rough and her heart cautiously guarded. Yet for all her independence, there was a loneliness she could not ignore. Clara's eyes, a stormy gray flecked with gold, held both determination and sorrow. Her dark hair, wild as the prairie wind, framed a face that had often been judged as too sharp, too stubborn, too unyielding. The townsfolk whispered constantly, warning strangers away with subtle hints and sideways glances. They called her unapproachable, untouchable, and many assumed that no man would ever stay. But Clara harbored a quiet longing, a hidden desire for connection that she dared not voice. She dreamed of someone who could see past the gossip and the judgments, someone who could appreciate both her strength and vulnerability. And she feared, too, that such a heart might never come. The town of Dry Creek itself seemed to mirror her contradictions. Wide-open skies stretched endlessly overhead, dotted with drifting clouds that promised freedom yet hinted at storms. Golden fields swayed with the wind, their beauty masking the hard labor and quiet struggles of ranchers and townsfolk. The creaking porch of Clara's farmhouse overlooked a landscape that was both welcoming and indifferent, a perfect reflection of her own heart. Little did she know, that landscape, that town, and that quiet life were about to shift dramatically. A man was coming, mysterious, imposing, and intent on challenging every conviction she had ever held about love, trust, and belonging. Luke Harper's arrival would awaken emotions she had buried for years, confront fears she had carefully hidden, and present choices that could change her life forever. The morning sun spilled over Dry Creek like a golden promise, but Clara didn't feel its warmth. Dusty pawed impatiently at the stable floor, snorting, while Clara brushed her mare's coat absent-mindedly, lost in thought. The town's whispers from yesterday still echoed in her mind, reminders that she was, in the eyes of many, untouchable. She shook her head, trying to focus on the work at hand, but a flutter of unease prickled at her spine. Something felt off. From the corner of her eye, movement caught her attention. A lone rider emerged from the rolling hills, the dust kicked up by his horse trailing behind him like a ghost. Clara squinted, trying to place him. She had seen riders before, travelers, ranch hands, merchants, but there was a difference in this one. He didn't merely ride through. He seemed to own the space around him, calm yet commanding, each movement deliberate, precise. As he drew closer, Clara noted the strong set of his shoulders, the confident ease with which his boots rested in the stirrups, and the slow, steady rhythm of his horse that mirrored his own controlled presence. Something about him tugged at her instincts, that same instinct that had saved her from trouble before. And yet, it was curiosity, not caution, that took hold. "Good morning," he called, his voice low but clear, carrying a quiet authority that made her pause. Clara's heart skipped. "Morning," she replied cautiously, keeping her tone neutral. "You're new around here." "Just passing through," he said, dismounting with fluid ease. His gaze lingered on her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that suggested he was trying to read her, something few dared to do. "Though I suspect this town has more stories than I expected." Something in his tone made Clara's stomach tighten. Little did she know, Luke Harper was already aware of much more than she could imagine. He had come to Dry Creek with a purpose, a past to settle, a secret to protect. But from the moment he first saw her, he realized Clara was not just another person in his path. She was a force he could not ignore. She tried to brush away the thought and turned back to Dusty, who nuzzled her shoulder as if sensing her unease. Yet even as she focused on brushing the mare's mane, she felt the stranger's eyes on her, patient, unrelenting. Every instinct she had screamed caution, yet another, deeper part of her felt inexplicably drawn to him. Over the next few hours, Clara couldn't ignore the subtle ways he became part of her world. He helped a neighbor mend a broken fence without being asked, moving with an ease that suggested experience far beyond the small town's limits. At the general store, he gave exact change, exchanged polite words, and yet his attention always flicked toward her, observing her movements with quiet intent. Clara began to notice small details, how he smiled faintly when she laughed at Dusty's antics, how he lingered near the barn just long enough to see her work, how the tilt of his head seemed to measure both the land and her presence on it. Her heart, long guarded, stirred in ways she hadn't expected. "Why are you watching me?" she asked one afternoon, unable to hold back her curiosity any longer as he leaned casually against the fence, arms crossed. He shrugged, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "I'm not watching. I'm noticing. You do things differently from most. It's rare. Rare." The word resonated deep within her, stirring a mixture of pride and vulnerability. Little did she know, it was true. Clara Dawson was unlike anyone Luke had ever encountered. And just as he was drawn to her, she was becoming aware that her carefully structured life, built on independence and caution, was on the brink of change. By evening, the prairie glowed with a fiery sunset, and Clara found herself on the porch staring out at the horizon. Luke's silhouette appeared at the edge of the fields, framed in gold and dust, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The encounter that had started as mere curiosity was transforming into something far more profound, something neither of them could yet define. Little did Clara know. The stranger before her was not merely passing through. He carried a history she could not yet comprehend, a secret that would soon demand her trust and courage. And as the wind swept across the prairie, whispering through the tall grasses, a silent truth settled in her chest. Her life, once predictable, was about to change forever. If you want, I can now expand the next section, story development, escalation of tension, 1/500 words. where secrets emerge, stakes rise, secondary characters appear, and Clara and Luke's connection deepens. The next few days settled into a strange rhythm, a dance between curiosity and caution. Clara woke each morning to the same sun-streaked skies and the familiar hum of the prairie wind, yet nothing felt as ordinary as it had before Luke Harper arrived. His presence was a silent current, shifting everything in ways she couldn't name. Luke was everywhere yet nowhere, helping neighbors with chores he didn't need to, repairing fences, tending animals, always returning to the edges of her vision without ever being intrusive. Every time their eyes met, Clara felt a shiver, a pull she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She tried to focus on her work. She rode Dusty across the fields, mended fences, and tended the garden, but her thoughts wandered. Who was he, really? What had brought him to Dry Creek? And why did he seem so invested in her, though they had spoken so little? Then there were the whispers. Some were harmless. Curiosity from townsfolk who had long assumed she was untouchable. But others carried a sharper edge. At the general store, Mrs. Calloway leaned closer than necessary and murmured, "He's trouble, you know. Men like that don't stay long, and they leave behind more than dust." Clara stiffened, but said nothing, the words lingering like a shadow she could not shake. Tom, a young ranch hand, offered advice in ways that were both cryptic and unnerving. "Don't trust him too fast," he said one morning while mending the barn roof. "I've seen strangers like him before. They come in, stir the winds, and vanish when the storm hits." Clara's instincts clashed with her curiosity. She wanted to trust Luke, to follow the strange magnetic pull he seemed to exert, yet her years of caution screamed at her to hold back. And Luke himself gave nothing away, sometimes candid, sometimes unreadable, always deliberate. His smiles were brief, his words measured, and his presence, though comforting, carried the weight of unspoken truths. It was during one late afternoon, as the sun slanted low over the golden fields, that the first real tension came to a head. Clara had been repairing a fence along the edge of the prairie when Luke appeared beside her. "Quiet as the wind. You're working too hard," he said, voice calm but insistent. "I manage," she replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "This land takes care of itself only so much." He leaned against the post, watching her with a careful intensity. "You're not like the others in this town," he said. "You carry more than they see. And you've built walls that even your own heart can't always breach." Clara paused, her hands gripping the hammer a little tighter. "How would you know that?" He shrugged, eyes scanning the horizon as if looking for something far away. "I notice. I've met people before like you, and like me. People who hide truths because the world doesn't make room for them. But hiding doesn't make the world safe, it only makes it lonely." The words struck her harder than she expected. She had spent so long shielding herself from disappointment, from judgment, from love denied, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. And now, standing beside Luke, she felt that sensation awaken, fragile and terrifying. Over the following days, small events stirred further questions. A neighbor whispered about the Harper Ranch, hinting at family secrets. A note, unsigned and cryptic, appeared tucked under Clara's door, warning her to be cautious. And then a stranger appeared, claiming to know Luke from another place. A man whose intentions were unclear, but whose presence added an undercurrent of danger. Amid all this, Clara's heart was caught in a delicate tension. She wanted to trust Luke, to believe that his quiet intensity and careful watchfulness were genuine. Yet each new revelation, each whisper of uncertainty, made her second-guess herself. She realized that to open her heart fully would mean risking not just heartbreak, but exposure to the harsh judgment of the town and the vulnerabilities she had spent years guarding. Luke, for his part, was aware of the delicate balance. He did not push. He did not overwhelm. But in quiet moments, the way he stood when she worked, the faint smile when she laughed, the small acts of protection when danger loomed, he made it clear that his attention was deliberate. His feelings deep and his loyalty unwavering. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the prairie in shades of gold and crimson, Clara found herself on the porch again, reflecting on the strange pull of recent days. Luke approached silently, standing at the edge of the porch like a sentinel in the fading light. "I didn't come here to change your life," he said softly, "but I can't ignore it either. There's a storm coming, Clara. A storm that will test what you believe about trust, love, and courage. You'll have to decide, run or stand. And whatever choice you make, there's no going back." The weight of his words settled over her. The sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving the prairie in twilight. And as Clara watched him disappear into the shadows of the fields, she knew instinctively that life as she had known it was over. The world she had built carefully, full of routines and walls, was giving way to something vast, uncertain, and irresistible. Little did she know, the next week would bring the moment of no return, a crisis that would demand every ounce of her courage, trust, and heart. The following week, Dry Creek seemed smaller, heavier, as if the wind itself carried the weight of unspoken truths. Clara woke each morning with a tight knot in her chest, an unshakable sense that her life was no longer her own. Every glance from the townsfolk, every whispered comment felt sharper now. And always, there was Luke Harper, silent, watchful, impossible to ignore. Then the letter arrived. It was small, folded neatly, slipped under her door while she had been tending Dusty in the stable. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it, revealing words written in a careful, deliberate hand. "Trust is dangerous. The man you've been noticing is not what he seems. What you think you know could destroy you." Her heart hammered. She had faced judgment before, endured whispers and glances. But this felt personal. It spoke of danger, secrets, and betrayal, the kind that demanded choices with no easy escape. Luke appeared without warning, leaning against the porch post, his shadow long in the afternoon sun. "I see you've received it," he said, voice calm but edged with concern. Clara's hands shook, crumpling the note slightly.
Why?
Her words faltered under the weight of fear and confusion. "Some things aren't meant to be known yet," Luke said, taking a careful step closer. "But you need to trust me. This is the point of no return, Clara. Whatever happens next, you'll have to choose, run or face it with me." Her chest tightened. Fear screamed at her to retreat, to protect herself, to preserve her independence. But every instinct, every flicker of hope she had felt in his presence, urged her to stay, to trust, to risk everything for something that might be worth it. The moment crystallized into tension as a rider appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the fading light. Clara recognized the stranger from the shadows she had glimpsed days before. His intentions were unknown, but his presence carried an immediate threat. She realized then that the quiet life she had clung to, the routines, the self-protective habits, even her walls, could no longer shield her. Luke reached for her hand, steadying her. "I'm not leaving," he said firmly. "I'm staying, always." Time seemed to freeze. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of dust, wildflowers, and danger. Clara felt the gravity of choice settle over her. To flee would preserve safety but abandon hope. To stay would demand courage, vulnerability, and trust in someone who could break her heart or save it. Her eyes met Luke's, and in that silent moment, she understood love, true love, was not without risk. It required surrender, bravery, and the courage to face the unknown together. The stranger drew closer, the tension snapping like a drawn bowstring. Clara squeezed Luke's hand, heart hammering. Whatever came next, she would not face it alone. And as the shadows lengthened and the prairie wind carried its low, haunting call, she realized she had already made her choice. The prairie was silent, the tension of the day settling into the golden light of evening. The stranger had left as abruptly as he had arrived, leaving behind nothing but dust and uncertainty. Clara stood on the porch of her farmhouse, Dusty nuzzling her shoulder, while Luke Harper remained at her side, steady and unwavering, a presence that had become both anchor and promise. In the quiet aftermath, Clara felt a shift within herself. She had spent years guarding her heart, protecting herself from judgment, from disappointment, from love denied. Now she understood that strength was not built in solitude, nor courage in avoidance. It came from trust, from surrender, from daring to let someone in despite the risk. Luke's hand found hers, fingers entwining with ease. His eyes, dark and steady, held a softness she had rarely allowed herself to see in anyone. "You chose to stay," he said quietly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "That's courage, Clara. The kind that can't be measured by strength alone." She returned his gaze, the fear and uncertainty of weeks past fading into something steadier, warmer, and deeper. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as the rumors had painted her, not as the town expected, but fully, completely, without judgment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, spilling gold and crimson across the endless fields, Clara and Luke stood hand in hand. The prairie stretched before them, vast, open, and full of possibility. Two hearts, once wary and guarded, had chosen each other, forging a bond, no turning back.